Muy buenas tardes. Un gusto saludarlos en este
Good
30
afternoon.
de
It is
octubre
a pleasure
del
to
2024,
to
siendo
to
las
have you
5 de
here,
la tarde.
October
Los
30th.
saluda Lorena Mercado,
This
Colegio
is
de
Lorena,
Proveedores,
and I am
y esta
president of
tarde
Ecuador.
es un gusto para
And this
mí
afternoon,
contar
it's our
con la
pleasure
presencia de
to
distinguidos
have
colegas mexicanos y extranjeros y una
our
invitada
friends
muy
and colleagues,
especial el
Mexican
día
and
de hoy
foreign.
nos acompaña. Estimado auditorio, esta
Dear audience,
presentación va a tener una traducción
this
simultánea,
presentation
con
is going to
nuestros
have a
invitados
simultaneous
y con
translation,
los colegas que desde Estados
English
Unidos
and
asistirán,
Spanish,
ya que tenemos de invitada la
welcoming our
representante
colleagues in the
de
United
la
States.
Praisal Institute, a
And
la
we are having
colega querida
our
Sandra
dear
Madrizi.
colleague,
Bienvenida a
Zandra,
este espacio virtual de
president
las
of the
Ecobares.
Appraising
Estamos
Institute.
por iniciar y tengo la
We're
compañía y la
about to
compañía
start,
del ingeniero César
and
Cantú,
I
que
have
es nuestro
my
anfitrión
colleague,
y
my dear
enlace
colleague,
con
Cesar,
la Comisión de Relaciones Internacionales, en
and he is
específico
collaborating with
de
the
la
International
Praisal Institute.
Relations
Y es
Committee,
para nosotros de gran interés e
and it's
importancia
our great
tener
interest
este lazo
to
profesional
have
con
this
nuestros colegas de
link,
Estados Unidos.
professional link with
Estamos
our colleagues in the United States,
emocionados
and we are
de las
thrilled
grandes alianzas que vamos
to
a
have
realizar
the
y que
upcoming
próximamente
alliances
tendremos
and
este encuentro
collaborations,
en el Congreso de
and to
UPAC
have
2024 que se celebrará
that
en
we are going
Puerto
to have in the
Vallarta, México. Desde
upcoming
México también
Congress
saludamos con
in
mucho
UPAF.
gusto a nuestros colegas de la
And
Unión
we greet
Panamericana de
our
Evaluación y
colleagues
Evaluación
of
que
the
están
Pan American
a unos
Union of
días de
Valuers,
recibirnos en Chile. Un
and they are
gusto,
about to
César,
receive us there
estimado.
in Chile
Adelante, por favor,
in the coming
platíquenos
days.
más de nuestra invitada.
Please, Cesar, give us talk about uh, our guest, special guest.
Hola, buenas tardes, tengan todos ustedes. Es un placer
Good afternoon.
presentarles
It is my pleasure
a Sandra
to present
Adomatis.
Sandra Adomatis.
Ella tiene la designación
She
SRA
has been, she is a CRA
en el Appraisal Institute y es
in the Appraisal
presidenta
Institute
actual del
and is
Appraisal
president
Institute
of the Appraisal
por
Institute
este periodo 2024.
for this year 2024.
También forma parte del comité ejecutivo del Appraisal Institute
She is also a member of the
y
executive
preside la
committee of
junta
the Appraisal Institute, and she
directiva
is
que
chair
establece
of the board
las
that
políticas de
establishes the
este
policies
instituto.
of this institute.
Ella ha sido evaluadora y
She has
consultora
been a
de bienes
valuer
raíces
of
por
real
más de
estate
25 años.
for over 25 years.
Es instructora de la Appraisal
She
Institute,
has been an instructor of the Appraisal Institute
desarrolla
and
seminarios y
develops
cursos
seminars and courses,
para
programs
el Appraisal Journal.
for the Appraisal Journal.
También tiene un libro que se llama
She has also written
Residential Green Valuation Tools, o sea, valuación de propiedades o
evaluation
de bienes, de edificios verdes. Esa es
of
su gran especialidad.
green real estate.
También
That's her specialty.
contribuyó para el Instituto Residencial
She has
de
contributed
Eficiencia
to the
Verde
Institute of Residential Green Efficiency.
que se desarrolló un adendum para ese proyecto.
There is an addendum for that project.
También tiene trabajos para el Appraisal Institute de Canadá
She has
en un
also been
apéndice
working for
de
projects for the
eficiencia
Canadian Appraisal Institute
energética
in energy
y ecológica.
and ecology, environmental.
Ha recibido un sinnúmero de
She
reconocimientos
has received a lot of prizes,
y entre otras cosas, se desempeñó como presidenta y
she
vicepresidenta
has also been president and vice president
del miembro del comité de redacción de informes de demostración residencial.
of Residential Reporting Committee.
Y actualmente forma parte del panel de clasificación
Currently, she is member of the
de
panel
demostración de conocimientos y
of the
redacción
to assess competences
avanzada de informes residenciales. Tiene mucha experiencia
She
en
has
este
great
tema y va a
experience,
ser un placer
and it's going to be a pleasure
escucharla
for all of us to hear
el día de hoy
her talking
esta
about
presentación que nos va a hacer
her presentation
acerca de ESG
on
o cómo se
ESG.
maneja en Europa y en Estados Unidos y
On
la
ESG
importancia
developed in
tiene
Europe and the United States,
actualmente a nivel mundial. Con
and
ustedes,
the status of this topic around the world.
la presidenta Sandra Adomatis.
Sandra,
Muchas
the
gracias.
floor is
Gracias,
yours.
César. Aprovecho para decirle a
you.
nuestro auditorio que nos sigue que estamos transmitiendo en Facebook.
I
en
just
YouTube
remind our
y en
audience that
YouTube
we are
en
transmitting
inglés.
by
Mi
YouTube and
interés es
Facebook.
conectarnos
So
con
please, you
colegas
can
y poder estar en contacto y en
be in
comunicación
touch
esta
and
tarde. Bienvenida, Sandra.
virtually.
Espacio.
You are very
Agradecemos
welcome,
muchísimo que haya
Sandra.
aceptado la invitación
We are
para
so pleased
participar
that you
en este
accepted our
tema.
invitation to talk
Bienvenida.
about this topic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It is a pleasure to be here with you. I wish I could be there in person. So I'm going to be speaking on ESG, that is a growing topic in the US and around the world. Next slide. So what I want to talk about tonight is the ESG reporting as we see it in the United States. And then secondly, how does ESG play a part in the real estate valuation? So let's start with the ESG reporting in the US. When I talk about this topic with appraisers, they will often ask, what does ESG reporting have to do with the valuation of real estate? Well, I'm going to tell you what it has to do with real estate. Next slide. The environmental, the E in the ESG, has to do with environmental. And that has a lot to do with real estate. And it also talks about the organization's commitment to the environmental practices, including the organization's carbon footprint. Remember, the ESG is a reporting that organizations do or businesses. So they are reporting on their carbon footprint, on the natural resources that they use, on waste management, and climate change initiatives. For instance, the energy efficiency of a building affects the carbon footprint. And the type of fuels that we use to generate energy affects the carbon footprint. Let's go to the next slide. On the social side, I know that my friends in Mexico are very social. I always enjoy visiting Mexico, Puerto Rico, Costa Rica, all the Southern American countries. But the S in social has to do with how we treat the people who work for us and our customers. That's the S in the ESG. It talks about customers and employees throughout the supply chain, human rights initiatives that the organization or the company has in place, diversity and inclusion. Are we accepting of all cultures, all races, and all protected classes? They also report on anti-harassment and discrimination and fair labor standards that the company has in place. Now, some of these social sides of reporting you may think has nothing to do with real estate, but I will address that as we move on. Next. So let's talk about the governance, how it affects the ESG reporting and real estate. It evaluates the organization's culture, their behavior and values, their corporate structure, and financial operations. And think about all the government regulations that affect real estate and employment laws. So now you can see how the ESG does affect real estate. Let's go to the next slide. So ESG is more than just investing. It's architecture and it's urbanism. Social, environmental, social, and governance was first introduced back in the 1960s, and it has gained momentum over time. And as we have more climate issues, we began to realize how the carbon footprint affects real estate. I am coming to you tonight from Punta Gorda, Florida. We had 2 hurricanes with massive flooding 11 days apart. And I know Mexico has experienced many climate issues as well. So from investing to data reporting to performance and supply chain management, it's only natural that the architecture and the urbanism has been brought into the fold of the ESG reporting. Next slide, please. So you're probably asking, seriously, how does this affect the valuation of real estate? I have begun to see some believers in the real estate valuation professionals. It's a two-way street. Property has to do with the environment. Property has to do with social, how we feel in the buildings where we're working, in the buildings where we're living. It has to do with governance. We have zoning laws. We have all kinds of legislation that affects the real estate and in turn affects the value of the real estate. Next slide, please. ESG has a positive impact on real estate. The ESG issues have become a strategic priority for real estate executive teams and boards in recent years. a lot of the top investors are looking for real estate that is environmentally responsible, and they want to see low carbon footprints and ESG reporting, even on the residential side. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac host many of the mortgages in the US, and they are also now doing ESG reporting. So when the appraisals come in, they look for energy ratings on the houses so they can bundle them into what they call a green mortgage security. And they can sell them at a higher rate on the secondary market. According to the 2022 study that was done of CEOs in the US, 82% of them said ESG was extremely important, or more important than factors when it comes to strategic decision making, up to 43% in 2019. So you can see this has been around for a while, although the valuation professionals have been slow to pick up on it. Next slide, please. So factors that influence ESG measures include we have a new act that the federal government put out called the Inflation Reduction Act. It includes significant benefits to green buildings by offering increased deductions for installing solar panels, heat pumps, and charging stations for electric vehicles. In other words, if a business or home implements these features, solar, heat pumps, or charging stations, they can get tax credits or rebates to implement them. Next slide, please. So those rebates, those tax credits and discounts incentivize investors and homeowners to implement renewables like solar and geothermal, charging stations. The commercial buildings have an energy efficient tax deduction that offers up to $5 a square foot in tax deductions for builders who create energy efficient commercial buildings. So again, it incentivizes them to build energy efficient buildings. So that's a government regulation. It's a tax credit. So again, you can see how it falls into ESG reporting and into real estate. They also implemented a 30% federal tax credit to offset the cost of the solar system or the geothermal or wind. For instance, if you paid $30,000 to put solar on your house, you could get a $9,000 tax credit on your income tax. That's less taxes you'd have to pay. So again, the government is really promoting the ESG reporting. Next slide. Click one more time. There you go. The Department of Energy announced on March 4th in the US that it's making a $90 million available to help states and localities adopt and implement building energy codes. We still have in the US, and you probably do in Mexico, areas where energy efficiency is not standardized. So they're trying to promote more localities, more cities to implement energy standards for buildings, commercial and residential and multifamily. Next slide. US climate reporting is starting to become a requirement. It is not mandatory at this point, but more and more investors are requiring it. In the US and abroad, regulations are forcing a pivotal point in climate reporting. What was once voluntary is increasing as we speak. On March 6th of this year, the Securities and Exchange Commission adopted rules to require registrants to disclose certain climate-related information in their registration statements and their annual reports. That includes boards of directors, oversight of climate-related risks that are out there, managing material climate-related risk, and climate-related targets. So that's in the financial world. So you can see how this will all affect buildings. Next slide. California is always ahead of the game. We always say what happens in California moves all across the United States. So we kind of look to California to see what's coming up next. So in September of last year, 2023, significant climate and ESG regulations were introduced. They came up with some new laws in California mandating certain large companies to disclose their greenhouse gas emissions and climate-related financial risk. It was called Bill 261. It requires public and private businesses to publicly disclose their exposure to physical and transition climate risk. It covered entities with annual revenues of over 500 million that do business in California on or before 1 of 2026. And they're going to implement fines up to $50,000 a year if you don't meet the law. So again, that goes back to the buildings that are there. What is their carbon footprint? How is it affecting the climate? And so $50,000 a year can be pretty substantial to some businesses and real estate. Next slide. They came up with another bill, Bill 253, that again requires the public and private businesses to report and disclose greenhouse gases. So it goes into cover annual revenues over $1 billion that do business in California. So even if you don't have a physical business in California, but you actually do business in California, they're asking you to report on the business there. Next slide. Another one of our states that has implemented a law that falls into the government side of the ESG is New York City. We will see how this affects real estate. I know that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are holding some mortgages on multifamily buildings in New York City. So they are concerned about their risk at this point. This law in New York City requires all commercial buildings larger than 25,000 square feet as well as common areas and residential buildings that are more than 25,000 square feet to upgrade their lighting. So that means condominiums and apartments, as well as retail stores, had to replace all their light fixtures by January of 2025. And that's coming up pretty soon. So many of the condominiums and apartment investors are quite concerned about the cost to do that. If they don't upgrade them, they have to pay a fine every year. So that fine would affect the income and expense statement of those buildings. Next slide. In New York City, another big change for commercial properties is the requirement for lighting controls. So not only do they have to put new lights in, but they have to put automatic controls on those lights to keep their carbon footprint down and their energy costs down. So on one side of the equation, these new changes to a building will lower their expenses. When you lower the expenses on an annual basis, you raise the net operating income, which means when you capitalize it, the property's worth more. However, if you don't have the funds to invest, it's going to be a negative to the value of the property. Next slide. So it's going to affect the highest and best use, what is legally permissible, financially feasible, and what's physically possible and maximally productive. Those are things where in the appraisal report, an appraiser will talk about these issues with the ESG side, the environmental side. Then in New York City, they just also passed a law called Local Law 97. It generally covers these 25,000 square foot buildings. It also covers 2 or more buildings on the same tax lot that together exceed 50,000 square feet. So again, the condominium associations are quite concerned about the cost to upgrade these condos. So we'll see in a few years, it might take 5 years for appraisers to really understand how this law and the other laws in New York City affect the value of real estate. As you probably understand, since COVID, many of the office buildings are vacant. People work from home. So those office buildings are already taking a hit in the market because they don't have the income coming in from the rent. And then you add this requirement by law on top of that, you can see how it is a huge concern. Next slide. So this is just more on the Local Law 97 in New York City. So if you're thinking about buying real estate in New York City, you might want to think again about it, or at least buy a building that's already been updated. So the questions you have to ask are, they have to report their utility bills as a proxy for their carbon emissions of the building. And this begins in next year, in 2025. And the first 6 years, limits are high on their carbon emissions, but significantly increase in 5 years in 2030. So how will that affect commercial real estate in New York City? How will it affect those condos? Will this law and growing ESG concerns influence energy upgrade trends? How will it affect valuation? So this is seriously something we have to think about and consider in our appraisal reports. Last week, a CEO of a large real estate appraisal franchise asked me for information on ESG because their clients are asking them to address it in narrative commercial reports. So as I was able to give him information that would help him. Buildings that do not comply with these ESG reporting rules and new laws in New York City are going to face penalties. They're going to have functional obsolescence. Next slide. So part 2. So how does ESG play a part in real estate valuation? I'm going to talk about residential. My residential colleagues told me that that has nothing to do with residential. It only affects businesses. But I'm here to tell you it does affect residential as well. Yesterday, I was in Boston, sitting in on a energy rating board of directors, where they're talking about the builders who are having to report on the carbon footprints of the buildings that they build in the US. Next slide. Energy efficiency and carbon footprint has the attention of Fannie and Freddie, of FHA and VA. These are the avenues for mortgages. And all of them have changed their guidelines, and they require residential appraisers to report on the energy efficiency of the houses. Next slide. Here we have an ESG reporting in the home building industry. This was a survey that was done on single and multifamily builders. And as you can see, some of them were already reporting on ESG. Some of them included in their financial reports, and some currently do not produce and publish the ESG, but they're looking to do that more. And you can see it happens more on the single family side, the detached side. Next slide. So what are the reasons, the home builders, for adopting the ESG reporting? Well, these are their answers. 47% said they are reporting on ESG as an effort to be socially responsible in their organization and business. 25% said ESG reports enhance our employees' and partners' understanding of the ESG strategy. 21% say that the reports are state and locally mandated, so they're already facing local mandates. And some say that it's required by SEC regulations. Next slide. So I already mentioned Fannie Mae's green bonds. They are mortgaging or bundling appraisal reports written by residential appraisers. If they have an energy rating with 60 or less, they can put it into the green bond securities for a resale at a higher rate, where Fannie Mae would make more money on them. and that includes multifamily as well. So where are they getting these energy ratings? They're expecting appraisers to document them in their reports. Next slide. So some of the ESG milestones that Fannie Mae has set up is a timeline of key developments in their journey of ESG. They have to report it for the securities reasons. Next slide. So here in the US, we have companies that give energy ratings. That was where I was yesterday at a board meeting. We have what we call a HERS rating. That's an energy efficiency rating for residential homes. And they also have a water rating, because water can also create a high carbon footprint. So those are the ratings that we use on the residential side. Next slide. We also have a mapping of the United States where we can go and find out what are the hazards in that locale. So on the commercial side, they are asking appraisers to report any hazards that are known in that area. So this would be a location where we could find those hazards for reporting. Next. So next we'll talk about the commercial real estate. Next slide. We have something here, and you may have it in some of your larger cities as well, called benchmarking. It's the practice of comparing the measured performance of a device, a process, a facility, or organization to itself, to its peers, similar buildings, or established norms. So the whole reason for benchmarking is to inform people as to how much energy they're using, how big is their carbon footprint, how are they hurting the environment. And it's also a way to encourage them to make energy efficient improvements to buildings. And some of the benchmarking is open to the public. So if it's open to the public, think about how that might affect rents they can obtain, or how that might affect a sale price of a property when they have to report all their energy use every year and make it public. Next slide. So here in the US, for benchmarking, we have an energy rating system that was set up by the government. And so there's actually a portal or a website where they have to input their energy use. As you can see here on the scale, they are given ratings of 1 to 10. And a 10, the highest number, uses the least amount of energy. This will also tell you how your building compares to other similar buildings. So again, it's a motivation to get investors to upgrade their buildings. Next slide. So the Commercial Energy Star has a scoring in this benchmarking program. And it scores up to 100. And a score of 50 is medium. Higher is better. So investors want to be sure their buildings get a high score so that they look good on financial reporting, on ESG reporting, and when they go to sell the building or rent the building. Next slide. So real estate investment trust also are reporting sustainability disclosures in their financial performance reports. You can see here on the slide how they're reporting their assets. Next slide. So when a building has not been upgraded to be energy efficient, to have a low carbon footprint, it is thought to have a brown building discount. I'm not sure where that term came from, but it's a term that I hear more often today. Properties that are less efficient or sustainable may depreciate, sometimes up to 30%, due to the growing demand for green buildings. So that decrease in value is known as a brown discount. If green premiums are the carrot, the brown discounts are the stick to motivate investors to do this. A survey of 4,000 real estate professionals by the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, RICS, found that the discount is likely to be up to 10% of the building's value, or in other words, 10% loss in value for not being energy efficient. Next slide. So again, here's the FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Administration's map that shows all the risk in the United States, are the areas of the US that have very high risk for environmental issues. As you would expect, Florida, Louisiana, part of Texas for all the hurricanes and floods, and all along the East Coast are susceptible to floods and hurricanes. And then along the West Coast of Florida, we have hurricanes, fires, floods, earthquakes. Next slide. This is just showing an area of New York City, Long Island. And as you can see, you can click on this map and it will show you if it's a relatively low risk or a higher risk. And Long Island is relatively low. So this would be the kind of document that an appraiser would put in their appraisal report. Next slide. So there are plenty of tools. I will click through this one. There's since you're probably not going to want to click on this tool. I don't think it covers Mexico. It only covers the US. So I'll click through the next one. But this gives you a list of all the things that you can learn about with this website. Strong winds, tornadoes, tsunamis, ice storms, lightning. We have a lot of that in Florida. Next slide. So with that, I will open up for questions.
Pues todos los compañeros que nos siguen y nos han seguido en esta
Please, all the
importante
colleagues that are
conferencia
following
de
this
núcleo que nos
conversation,
ocupa a nivel internacional,
that is
como ya
a
aquí
topic that
secretarios
is
ASG
very important
representan una gran
for us to
oportunidad
be
de desarrollo
occupied
y es una
on
oportunidad
them
de
around the world.
crecimiento sustentable. Los valuadores
To have
en
the
estos
sustainability
próximos
approach,
estándares
the
que
values
tendremos en el 2025, pues deberemos
In
abordar esta
2025,
circunstancia y
we
sobre
need
todo
to
por
consider the
darle una
circumstances,
oportunidad para los desarrolladores, para el
mainly
gobierno,
for
en la búsqueda
developers,
de dinero que tiene unas tasas más competitivas y que sin
in
duda
order
los
to
bonos
get
sustentables
better
representan
finance for these
oportunidad de
projects.
desarrollo.
We need to
Evidentemente,
comply with
los
these
retos son muy
ESG
importantes
characteristics.
y sin duda sabemos que estamos en tiempos de cambio.
Without
El
doubt,
futuro
we
yo
know
creo
we
que el
are in
futuro
times of change.
ya es
The
hoy
future
y
is
tenemos que
now.
actuar y pues
We
hemos
need to
visto
act
eventos, lo
now, to get
mencionaba
action now.
Sandra, como el huracán que pues
And like just
estaba
Sandra mentioned, the
así por
hurricanes
sorprendernos en México y
that
que
has
tomó
just
un
surprised us
camino
again in
acelerado
Mexico.
hacia la Florida. Estábamos
Going towards
reunidos en el
Florida. It
Congreso
skips Mexico, but
Nacional de Nuestra
went
Nación
to
y viajamos
Florida.
con incertidumbre.
And we are
Tenemos
traveling
que
with
ver qué estamos
uncertainty.
viviendo. La resiliencia ya es
We need to
una
be
posición
resilient,
que debemos de adoptar como seres humanos,
and it's a
como
position we
ciudadanos,
need to
porque
adopt as
sabemos
human
que
beings.
hay muchos retos. Lo estamos viendo en
We have a
España,
lot
en
of
Valencia, ahorita
challenges,
están atravesando un momento muy
and
complejo y
we
con
are crossing
responsabilidad
through hard
debemos
times,
adoptar esta
and we need to adopt
nueva modalidad de
these new
analizar que ya no solo
these
los
new
instrumentos económicos son lo
policies.
importante,
It is not
sino que
about
también
economics
estos
and
factores
economic
sostenibles
driven.
que
It is also
deben
because
desde
it's
los gobiernos
important
corporativos
in other
como políticas
factors.
para las
We need
empresas y para los
policies for
sectores
the companies
financiero, inmobiliario,
in the financial
pues nos
sector.
ponen este gran reto a la humanidad
We need
para hacer
to
acciones
have
hoy y hacerlas
these
pues
challenges for the
muy
humanity, and we have
comprensiblemente. Es la
to
respuesta que se
to
espera de nosotros,
answer,
de los
give
profesionales,
a proper
con
answer from
estas
valuers to
nuevas
these
análisis
challenges.
que tendremos que hacer como evaluadores profesionales en los diferentes
And
ámbitos y especialidades.
the
Pues
new things
quisiera
that we as valuers
solicitar,
need to do
estimado César, si nos
for the
apoya con
future.
algunas
Please,
preguntas.
Cesar, if
Sabemos
we
que
have,
están
give us
apareciendo en
some
las diferentes
questions
redes
from the audience. Please
desde
check
los
if there are some
amigos que nos
questions from the
siguen
audience,
esta
from
tarde.
our friends
Pues
that are
esta
following
interesante
us in this
plática, estimada
transmission.
Sandy, que disfrutamos esta tarde.
Sandra, we enjoyed so much your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. It is an honor to be here with you.
Creo que César tiene algún problema de conectividad. Si es así, pues voy a pedirle, estimada Doria, hay algunas preguntas en las plataformas. No sé si tengas manera de consultarlas, porque ese es el reporte que me dan. ¿No? Perfecto. Bueno, aquí estamos esperando unos minutos. Pues ha sido realmente una tarde
We are going to wait a
de
few minutes for our
de
colleagues to
reflexión,
place
diría
their
yo,
questions.
de
It has been great
análisis
presentations
de
for us
este
to have
estupendo
some reflections
labor,
and analysis,
estimada Sandy, que desarrollas en
mainly because
esta área de
Sandra
conocimiento
is
tan
developing in this
emocionante para
new
nuestro
area of
quehacer
knowledge
profesional. Hablábamos de
professionally.
generar valor, que yo
We
creo
are
que estos
talking about
criterios
creating value,
ESG pues son un
ESG,
paso muy importante en México.
and this is a step we
Recientemente
have to take, a very important step that we have to take in
publicación
Mexico,
de la taxonomía
and
sustentable,
start
donde se
talking about
aborda
the
por
whole
parte de
taxonomy
Hacienda
of this
esta
ESG,
agenda verde que
the
sin
green
duda
agenda that
tenemos
we have to put in place.
un gran reto por delante
It
en la
is a
adopción de
big
los
challenge
criterios
in
y
front of
sobre
us,
todo en responder a este cambio que
and
mencionabas
and
después de la pandemia
and we need
con el
to
trabajo remoto,
uh, take action
los
to
edificios
answer to this big challenge
corporativos,
after the
pues viven un
pandemic.
gran reto, ¿no?
Mm.
Nuevas tasas de ocupación.
We
Ahorita en
have new
México, aquí en la Ciudad de México, tiene
employment.
unas inversiones muy importantes en el sector de
We have
oficinas y pues ha
very
sido
important
un
investments
camino
in real
de
estate.
adaptación, de
It's an
creación de nuevos
adaptation
modelos,
process
¿no?
to new
Compartir
models
oficinas,
and to
que
share
son
spaces,
resultado
working spaces,
de buscar este espacio y reconvertirlo
and
para
try
abordar
to
las nuevas
to
necesidades, ¿no?
to have a convertibility of these new spaces into new uses. And it is a matter for our professional activity, and we are pleased to exchange information among our profession. And we are very pleased with this new alliance. And with Cesar participating actively institutionally. That is very important.
No sé, César, si ya te llegaron estas preguntas de nuestros seguidores de esta tarde.
Mira, lo que comentan.
No sé, César, si ya te llegaron estas preguntas.
Lo que comentan en el chat es.
What is being commented in the chat?
Muy interesante el
It is
tema,
about how interesting
que definitivamente es un tema que
this
hay
topic
que
is. Definitely.
aprendiendo y estudiando.
That we need to keep learning.
Y muchos saludos a Sandra.
A lot of congrats for Sandra and greetings for Sandra.
Por el evento que nos presentó. Realmente preguntas como tal no
There are
tenemos,
no questions as such,
sí
actually, but a lot of congratulations to Sandra.
Y que es un tema que requiere más
and commenting
estudio,
on that this topic needs deeper study
se tiene que
and
aplicar
broad
prontamente
knowledge
aquí
on
en
it.
México.
And mainly for Mexico, of course.
Mhm.
Cesar, I don't know, I know I may not, but I do have questions.
You have a question?
Yes,
Okay,
many,
well,
but
I don't
maybe
see it.
just a couple, maybe just one for anyone in the audience to jump in, maybe.
Okay.
Sandra, you mentioned a lot about this energy efficiency emphasis across business buildings to home buildings, multifamily buildings, but is it something beyond energy? Is it water efficiency to being considered, for example, which is a struggle cities as big as Mexico City and I guess New York too. It is a concern for so many people living in just one city. So I don't know if there is something on that you can talk to us about.
Yes, water is another big issue. I don't think we realize how much energy is used to create our water and to heat water. So that's another measurement that they're using to measure your carbon footprint is water use. And water is becoming a very limited commodity these days, especially in the larger cities. We're having to put moratoriums in place. In Florida, sometimes we can't water our yards because there's not enough water in the aquifers. So water is another huge resource that we need to be very aware of how much we're using.
Okay, now I have the people start asking questions. One of them is
Ya la gente
asking.
empezó a preguntar. Una persona pregunta. Sorry. One of the people is asking.
Gracias por iluminar.
Thank you for enlightening
conocimiento.
us.
¿Pudieras explicar
Can you please
cómo
explain how
ESG
ESG
afecta o impacta
affects
las
or
pólizas
impact
de seguro
the insurance policies
en los próximos años?
in the years to come?
Y si el loan to value es afectado para propiedades comerciales y
If the loan to value
residenciales.
is increased for retail real properties for tax purposes.
Yes, it's the insurance issue is a growing issue. just had that discussion yesterday about the increased cost of insurance. So that's going to affect the expense side of the operating expenses of a building. So it's going to end up lowering the value of these buildings. Some of the insurance companies are giving you discounts if you bring your building up to an energy efficient standard. So that is another way of incentivizing investors to bring their buildings up to a higher standard. But again, that costs money, and some economies just can't spend that kind of money right now.
Okay, I have another question. When can you teach one of these courses? They want to learn more.
All right. Well, the Appraisal Institute has several courses on this, on commercial and on residential. So let me work with Cesar and see what we can do.
Okay.
And Cesar, we have a commercial book on energy efficient buildings and sustainability. It's in English, but maybe that would be something you'd be interested in.
Yes, I mentioned that when I present your curriculum, I mentioned about the book that is in the Appraisal Institute for sale.
Yeah, there's two, one for residential and one for commercial.
No tengo más preguntas, esas llegaron acá al chat privado. No sé si hay alguna otra pregunta por ahí. Ernesto Mock say thanks for he's the one that asked the question of the enlightening of our knowledge, the first question.
Okay.
Thanking for that. And Alejandro del Real that wants the next course. Okay. Some other question is from Carla Peinado. There is a possibility of getting training programs on this topic, ESG, for appraising in Mexico. Seek to prepare what's coming. Okay, the same thing that you mentioned a while ago, Sandy, that we're trying to look for something.
Yes. Maybe
people is asking for that information.
Maybe we could put a work group together to do an addendum that would be helpful, that is particular to Mexico.
Thank you. Son todas las preguntas. No sé si tienes alguna otra que te haya llegado por ahí, Edmundo. Well, just congratulations. That's what the people is. Well, this is a new topic for us. So it's the people doesn't have too many questions because it's something very new, and we sometimes don't know how to use it. So that's the main issue, that maybe one day we put together, or you put together, a presentation of an hour and a half or 2 hours or 3 hours, a larger webinar that will give more information for this type of issues.
Sure.
ESG is important, definitely. Presidenta.
Sí, muchas gracias, estimado César. Sin duda ha sido una tarde.
Thank you so much, César. It has been a very great afternoon to talk about this important topic, and that we mentioned in the last Congress. And the big topic was sustainability. And we had a very important conversation in Monterrey about the actions, the important actions, trying to incentivize developers to implement actions to achieve
disminución del consumo energético de
this
los
reduction
9
in energy
estados
consumption
recomiendan desde el proyecto.
since
Mi
the
estimada
beginning of the
Sandra, en
project
México,
itself.
una gran cantidad de evaluadores
There has
somos
been
arquitectos. Y
great,
desde ahí sabemos
great
cuál
part
es
of
la
our
información
community are
de
architects,
sustentabilidad que podemos
and we are
realizar
thinking in
desde el
sustainability
proyecto. Yo creo que desde ahí
and how
debemos
to start the
la
project.
importancia de buscar las orientaciones, de
And that is
procurar la
when we need
ventilación
to
natural. Tú sabes, en
have the
México
approach
tenemos un clima
of sustainability.
extraordinario. Es normalmente, bueno, algunos compañeros de Mexicali, de por
There
allá
are
de Baja California, me dirán que no es verdad.
some
Hemos
colleagues in
llegado
Baja and
incluso
Mexicali
a más de 50 grados, pero en
that
general
had to
en la República
endure
Mexicana
very high
aún
temperatures.
tiene climas en los que se puede optimizar la ventilación
And
natural,
there are
los
environments and
asolamientos,
climates where
acciones que
we can
permitan desde el
exploit a
diseño y el
wind
proyecto y el
flow
desarrollo de la construcción,
and
implementar grandes
change the,
acciones.
the,
Yo creo que
the,
se
the
requiere
development of new
importante transmitir el
constructions
conocimiento que ustedes han desarrollado
and
en
learn
este
from the
camino
knowledge that you have
los retos
developed
de
in
el uso de
in the
turbina,
usage
de aire
of
acondicionado, de calefacción
air
energética,
conditioning
y
or
es bien
heating,
relevante
which is
poner
quite relevant.
en la mesa eficiencia energética, esta
This
huella de
energy
carbono
efficiency
que se produce al hacer el uso de esta
and
energía.
these
Y
carbon
sabemos
emissions
que
that
no
are
es solo el
produced when
agua.
we use
El
this
agua está
energy and the
siendo
water,
un gran reto para la
the
humanidad
carrying of
en
water
países que
efficiency,
adolecen de este
because
vital
there are a lot of countries
líquido,
that
y
are
pues hemos visto
already
que muchas veces
suffering
algunos como población pues
for
tienen que
a
ver con el
scarcity in
agua, ¿no?
water.
Desde la historia hacia
And that
acá
is
hay
what is also a driver of
pueblos muy
migrations.
importantes que se desplazan por la escasez del agua.
There is
Así que
whole communities that
creo que
are
nosotros como
being
evaluadores y
migrants
mutualistas y
because of
consultores que
this
somos
scarcity of
de nuestros
water.
clientes, pues es muy importante sensibilizar, lo
We need
mencionaba en el
ourselves,
Congreso,
but also our
desde la
clients to
contratación de
focus
seguros
on these
serios,
new
porque sabemos que los riesgos
adventures.
meteorológicos pues se
And we know
volvieron
that the
atípicos,
weather
inusuales
and
y
all the weather
sorpresivos,
crisis
¿no? En
and the
24
climate change
horas
crisis.
hemos visto la humanidad como un huracán categoría 1
We
se
have
convierte en
seen as
5
humanity
y sorprende a la población y causa
five
daños
great
muy graves, como
hurricane
lo que
is
fue
causing
el puerto de Acapulco
huge
el
damages,
pasado
like in
octubre del
Acapulco
2023.
in
No lo habíamos
2023.
visto como
And
una
we haven't seen
fuerza
anything like that
estadounidense
before
llegaba y destruía una
and destroyed
población tan importante,
a whole
un
community,
puerto
which is
turístico
large community in
de
Acapulco.
esta manera. Entonces, ahí está la importancia de
So
entenderlos y saber
it is
que
a
la
relevant
gobernanza tiene
topic
que ver con tomar acciones,
and we
con
need
llevar
to
un
take action
comportamiento consciente de todos
and we
estos
have to
factores entre la
behave
responsabilidad social antes de procurar
consciously
solo la generación de una economía o de
to develop
recursos,
an
de ver
economy and
todos estos
resources
factores para el buen
and
desarrollo de
consider
la humanidad y
these
con ello pues
factors
generar valor
for
a
the
nuestro cliente,
survival of
porque hay un impacto
humanity,
positivo en
because
esta
there is
ciudad.
going to be a
Querida
positive
Sandra,
impact
pues
if
ha
we
sido
do.
un gusto enorme
It has
recibirte en
been
este
our
espacio
great pleasure
desde
to
la
have you
Federación de
here
Colegios de Evaluadores
at
en
FECOBAL
México, y desde aquí saludar también a nuestros colegas de la
and
UPAP que hoy
greet
nos escuchan,
also our
donde
UPAV
próximamente
friends
vamos a
that we
celebrar
are gonna
ese congreso
meet
en Chile, y yo sé que todos
in
estos temas que el día de
in a few
hoy
days
nos
more
pusiste sobre la mesa pues van
and
a ser
discuss, of
muy
course,
relevantes
all these
en lo
topics
que
you
requiere
have bring
pensar
us,
inteligencia artificial, tecnología,
talking about
un mundo
artificial
cambiante y
intelligence and
entendible.
new
Pues sin
technologies.
más, mi estimado César, muchísimas gracias por este enlace, por esta
Thank you,
comunicación que
Cesar,
tenemos con esta
for this
asociación
new
hermana.
link we
Valoro
have
muchísimo tu gestión,
among
como
valuers.
siempre. Y
We
bueno,
value
a Sandra, mi
your
agradecimiento
collaboration in
por
these endeavors.
participar en esta tarde en la que todos aprendimos un
Thank
poco
you,
más
Sandra, for
de estos 20
participating
videos
in this
SG,
event
de la
where we
sustentabilidad
all
y los
learn so
retos que
much.
tenemos por delante.
And adopt and take the challenges we have for the future.
César, si,
Thank you.
si nos apoyas despidiendo a nuestra invitada, quiero recordarles a nuestros amigos que en la plataforma de Facebook estamos con traducción en español y los colegas que nos quieran seguir en YouTube estaremos con esta traducción en inglés para continuar con este enlace entre asociaciones hermanas en Estados Unidos y México.
We are gonna follow the conversation in English in YouTube and collaborate there.
No sé, César, si podemos compartir con Sandra para que se dirija un mensaje.
César, do you want to share some last message with Sandra and share something with Sandra?
Sandra, pues muchas gracias. Fue una excelente
Sandra, it
participación.
has been a great
Un tema
presentation,
muy importante que
relevant
no se ha
topic
tratado con la
that has
profundidad
not
con la que
been
tú tocaste el tema, que
seriously
esto vino a
presented
despertarnos
as you did this time.
la necesidad de conocer más sobre
And
este tipo de
you
estudios.
just give us the need to learn more about these topics.
Y estoy seguro que
And I'm
los
sure
demás compañeros que nos
that the other
estuvieron
colleagues
escuchando el día
that
de
were
hoy
hearing you today
van a preguntar y a
will
desear tener
ask
más información al
and
respecto,
want to have more information on the topic.
por lo que sería muy importante
That's why I
platicar
think it would be
sobre un
important
tema relacionado para dar unas charlas aquí en México,
to
un
make
curso de 7 horas o 5
7
horas,
hours
algún
program
tema
in
de esos,
Mexico physically in
porque
person.
también la gente, me llegó ahorita una pregunta,
Because one of
hablaste de
the questions in the chat
beneficios fiscales
about the tax benefits
en los
you
Estados
mentioned
Unidos.
in the US.
Nosotros no tenemos eso aquí
We
en
do not
México
have that
todavía.
right now.
Entonces es un buen tema
So it would
interesante
be an
para hablar
interesting
con los
topic
desarrolladores,
to talk
hablar
with
con el
developers
gobierno,
and the government
tú sí,
in Mexico
tú sí, para ver si se puede hacer alguna cosa similar.
to see if we can do something similar like you are doing in the States.
Muchas gracias por tu apoyo
Thank you
y
so
nos
much for your
seguiremos viendo.
support.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Presidenta, usted dice, sigue el reporte de los
Correcto. Es correcto, mi
trabajos.
estimado César. Vamos a ir con
Sí.
la oferta académica que nuestra
Eh,
compañera Doria desde
We are
Tabasco
gonna
nos,
provide
presenta
the
esta tarde
educational
y, sobre
programs
todo,
that
los
we
próximos
offer at
cursos que
FECOBAL with
ofreceremos
Doria.
ahí en la Federación de Colegios de Evaluadores a través de todos los colegios del interior de la República que integran la federación. Adelante, Doria. Muchas gracias. Gracias, Sandy.
¿Qué tal?
Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Presidenta. Como siempre, es un gusto presentarles la oferta académica que me permite compartir.
We are gonna show you
Para el mes de noviembre
the
tenemos
program
esta
we have, the educational program we
oferta
have for
académica.
November.
Y bueno, la próxima semana, que ya
Next
es
week.
viernes y sábado 8 de noviembre, el Congreso UPA en
We
Puerto
have
Varas,
the
Chile.
UPEP Congress.
Así que todavía estamos a tiempo de poder participar.
We still have time to be there.
Parte del programa del programa de capacitación de evaluación INDAVID presenta
In
y
Davin,
ofreciendo
which is one of the
programa
Evaluators
de
Associations of
impuestos
FECOBAL,
a los bienes
it's going
nacionales.
to
Es este próximo
show
8
a
9 de
program
noviembre
on
del
earthquake
2024,
risk in
y con
the
una
national
duración de
real
10
estate,
horas. La
national
especialidad
property.
es inmuebles. También el Colegio de Evaluadores Comaví les está ofreciendo el taller de
FECOBAL
avalúos
and one of its
lectoras
institute,
de
Comavin,
transferencias.
it's
Este
gonna have
próximo
a
8 y
course
9
on
9 de noviembre,
transfer
un marco
prices
curricular de 10 horas impartido por el maestro Marco Antonio Cano Gómez. Covamex y Fecomal también están
Also in
ofreciendo
collaboration,
este
FECOVAL and COVAMEX,
curso, evaluación de tierras
they
de
will
régimen
have
veredal y
a
comunal.
course on land
El ponente,
valuation,
el
land
ingeniero
property,
Luis Alfonso
and
Pasos Linares. Es este
land
próximo
for
martes
harvesting.
12 de noviembre de 16 a 21 horas y miércoles 13 de noviembre de 16 a 21 horas.
Common property and
Un
land
valor
valuation.
curricular de 10 horas. También dentro del programa de capacitación INDAVIN, esta clínica
Also, as part of the
es
training
con el tema evaluación industrial,
course of
con un
INDAVIN,
valor
we're
curricular
going
de
to have
10 horas.
industrial
Los
valuation.
ponentes, ingeniero Alberto López Cueva, ingeniero Isidro Castellanos, son 10 horas y está programada para el viernes 15 de noviembre de 16 a 21 horas y sábado 16 de noviembre de 9 a 14 horas. Y la ofrece el Colegio Varadores de Sonora y FECOVAL.
This is offered by one of the institutes in Sonora
Para
State,
cerrar
northern
el
state
programa
of
de
Mexico.
capacitación de Clínicas INDAVIN 2024 es el maestro
Also, there is going to be a program on
que nos presenta
real
criterios
estate
metodológicos
specialized
para la evaluación de inmuebles especializados
methods to
el
value
próximo
real
viernes
estate.
22 de noviembre de 16 a 21 horas y sábado 23 de noviembre de 9 a 14 horas, con un valor curricular de 10 horas y es para la especialidad de inmuebles y agropecuarios. Les dejo un resumen de los cursos que están vigentes y que se imparten en este mes de noviembre. Y la especialidad en evaluación de bienes aeronáuticos ya tiene
There
fecha
is
de inicio
also
para enero
course on
2025.
the
Esta tercera generación
for experts
será
in
un programa
valuation of
semipresencial, 80% en línea
euro
y 20%
property,
presencial. Están los datos, el QR
like
para los
air
que gusten
property.
inscribirse. Estamos a tiempo. Y bueno, el Congreso Internacional de Evaluación 2025 ya
And we
está
were having
programado
our
para el
International
9 y 10 de
Valuation
octubre.
Congress 2025.
Será en la Ciudad de México con el tema El poder del valor.
It's gonna be, the event is gonna be called The Power of Value,
Generador de confianza.
which generates trust.
Y ofrece una oferta o una preventa hasta el 31 de octubre, o sea, mañana. Como preventa, el carnet para congresista tiene un costo de 7,000 pesos y el carnet para acompañante tiene un costo de 3,500 pesos. También ya está en promoción la revista Valuador
We
Profesional.
also have our magazine, Professional Valuer.
Consultar
It's already available, the new edition.
Y la oferta bibliográfica, bueno, son los 8 libros que ya conocemos del maestro ingeniero Leoncio Angulo Valenzuela, que tiene un costo de 1,300 pesos. Y los libros de la maestra doctora Aide Mendoza, que es Herramientas para la Evaluación de Proyectos de Inversión. Y la doctora María Teresa Rodríguez.
There is also some bibliography references available for valuers to buy.
Eso es lo que tenemos de oferta académica y no olviden seguirnos en nuestras redes sociales. Muchas gracias a todos. Buenas tardes.
Muchísimas gracias, estimada Doria. Te agradecemos muchísimo esta información
Thank you, Doria,
valiosa.
for the
Y a todos
information.
nuestros amigos que esta tarde
And we thank
nos
all our
siguieron
friends
en
that this
esta
afternoon
transmisión
connected
que
to
realizamos con mucho
our
cariño para todos
platform.
ustedes de este tema tan importante y relevante. Les agradecemos desde
And
la
we
Federación. Soy
thank
Lorena
you
Mercado, presidenta de la Federación de
all
Colegios de Evaluadores, y me despido y agradezco su
to be here
presencia.
with us.
Nos vemos dentro de 15 días. Un abrazo.
We see each other. We will see each
Gracias,
other in a
buenas
couple
tardes.
of weeks. Bye-bye.
Saludos y gracias a todos.
Gracias.
Creo que ya podemos despedir a Sandy.
A ver, ya
Muchísimas
se fue. Ahí
gracias.
está. All right,
Muchísimas
yeah.
gracias
We
de
are
corazón.
out of the transmission.
Sí,
Okay.
yo en Chile.
Bye.
Bye, bye.
Muchas gracias.
Ok. Hasta
Bye.
luego. Gracias y saludos.
Gracias. Buenas